Iran doesn't want to move quickly. This is good for Iran. Iran is loving this. And they've been preparing for a war of attrition with us for 20 years. The enemy gets a say.
I don't think the Ayatollah would agree that this has been good for him. I mean,
I didn't say for the Ayatollah.
But the top layer of the regime would not agree that it's been good for
We've opened up sanctions.
We saw Adam Mockler appear on CNN to go up against Scott Jennings during a heated discussion about Donald Trump's war in Iran, and the exchange quickly turned intense as the panel debated the direction and impact of the conflict, with Jennings strongly defending the war while others challenged its results and rising costs, and the moment gained attention after the discussion escalated on air, becoming part of a wider conversation about how media panels are handling political debates right now. So in this video, we are going to break down some of the key clips from that CNN segment and share a closer look at what actually happened and what it reveals.
I'm just looking back at what we've gotten out of this so far, or what anyone's gotten out of this so far. The regime is unchanged. The Iranian people are not liberated. The nuclear materials
still there.
Strait of Hormuz, still closed.
And it wasn't closed before, to be clear, before this started.
No, I mean now, closed.
Right. No, you're right. I just mean, what have we gotten out of it? We have gotten a closed Strait of Hormuz.
We're in a worse spot. And obviously we're seeing the result of this economic pain and people very frustrated with, being misled, lied to during a campaign in which we were told Biden and Kamala were going to get us into a war with Iran and Trump wasn't. And people who just dealing with the economic frustration. I think at the very least, because suddenly everyone's a foreign policy expert, right? And some are going to say, we're winning this war, and Trump is saying it's terminated. There's no unilateral termination. Iran gets a say. But putting all of that aside, at the very least, I think it's very clear Trump, Hegseth have failed to sell this war to the American people. And that's what we're seeing in those poll numbers. And that's a big deal in an election year.
Yeah, well, let's dig into some of this polling for this side of the table, because as he astutely points out, I think it helps explain the disparities here. Okay, so the right decision, wrong decision in the Washington Post poll, 61% say that it was a mistake to take military action against Iran. 36% say that it was the right decision. Now, what does this split look a lot like? I don't think I have it to hand, but let me just tell you, it looks a lot like President Trump's approval rating, okay? His up or down. Now, compare, this is Iran, Iraq, and Vietnam, okay? Obviously, in Iraq, the Bush administration did a ton of work, much, of course, later discredited, but at the time, they did a lot of work to convince the American public that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that getting rid of Saddam Hussein was a good idea. And they built up public opinion. They sent Colin Powell to the United Nations to work on that. Now, Vietnam, I'm going to date myself, but you all know that I was not around for the Vietnam War. My knowledge of how that was sold to the American public was quite different, but that also came in the context of a very long fight against communism in the wake of, two world wars, the Korean War, and other places. But it's just worth noting that the polling that you are looking at in Iraq, okay, 2007, when these numbers look like what the Iran numbers look like now, 2007 was 4 years after we invaded. In Vietnam, 1970, well into the conflict. Scott Jennings, how big of a mistake was it for the president to do this without bringing the American public along with him?
Well, look, I noted in the other survey you put up that 41% said it was too soon to tell. And I suspect what they are waiting for is whether we meet the primary objective, which I do think the president's been pretty clear about. We can't let them have a nuclear weapon. And so if we exit this thing, whenever we exit this thing, and can tell the American people, yes, this stuff was buried under the rubble, we've got a plan to extract it, or it's not going anywhere, or however we explain that they're not going to be able to build a nuclear weapon, I suspect a good chunk of the people who say, too soon to tell, will say, okay, well, we exit it having met our objective. Now, the question is, how long is that going to take? And the truth is, we don't know the answer to that. I think the president would like it to happen right now. He obviously would love to make a deal right now. And I also think the president believes that the blockade, in which we're not actually dropping any bombs on them, we're just in the middle of a blockade right now, is actually more effective at hastening the end of this than the military campaign was. I hope that's true. I interviewed a former Rear Admiral this week. And he was like, yeah, a little patience on the blockade, and you may just get what you want, which is ultimately bringing the Iranian economy to its knees, bringing them to the table, getting China to force them to end this. And the way it can only end for him is they don't have or cannot build a nuclear weapon.
There is growing criticism about how often Scott Jennings continues to appear on these segments, especially after his widely discussed exchange with Adam Mockler, where many viewers felt he came off poorly. And that moment circulated widely, leading to a strong public reaction, with many loco arguing that his presence on the network should be reconsidered. And alongside that criticism is the perception that he is consistently defending policies tied to Donald Trump's administration, which remains highly controversial and unpopular among large sections of the public. And critics extend that frustration to figures like Pete Hegseth and others associated with that political circle, describing them as out of touch, while commentary from figures like Casey Hunt has pointed out that support for certain policies closely mirrors Trump's approval ratings, suggesting that only a specific segment of supporters continues to back those narratives. And there is an argument being made that as economic pressures such as rising gas prices continue to impact everyday people, that support base could shrink further, especially as critics highlight moments where Jennings appears to avoid directly addressing those issues, instead reacting with dismissive gestures or deflection, which has been interpreted by some viewers as a sign of weakness in the argument. And the broader claim is that as opposition grows not only among Democrats, but also independents, and even some former supporters, the effectiveness of that messaging may continue to decline over time as real-world impacts become harder to ignore.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you and others who have sat in the Republican seat on this show have made an excellent case for why it's important that Iran not have a nuclear weapon. It's that the president didn't do that in advance, right? Jamal, I mean, I want to bring this up because I think it's important to underscore, right? We talk about gas prices, right? You all drive by your local gas station, you know what it costs, but it's not just about the numbers. I mean, we do averages here. That's kind of the easy thing to pull, but the Washington Post asked Americans, how is this impacting you? What are you doing differently because these gas prices are higher? 44% said they had to cut back on driving. 42% are cutting back on household expenses. 34% are adjusting their travel and vacation plans. 15% are considering buying an EV. Although that is potentially about to get way more expensive, by the way. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah. Don't do that.
But Jamal, I mean, we're heading into a midterm election, and this is how Americans are feeling.
They are. I think the president's problem fundamentally, obviously the war is bad, people don't want to be there, it's against his brand. He ran as an economic turnaround artist, and the economy hasn't turned around. Prices are even higher in some ways than they were a year ago. He is run against getting involved in Middle East wars, and now we're in the middle of a Middle East war, and people don't really understand why, and they don't know when it's going to be over. And then the president also ran on, dealing with immigration. What they did not expect was that a bunch of American citizens were going to get wrapped up in that, and a couple of them were going to get killed. This all is against what he ran for as president of the United States. And I think that house is starting to collapse in on him. Now, the question is, what can he do to turn this around, whether it's in the next 6 months or in the next 18 months for whoever's going to succeed him? I'm just not sure there's much he can do, because once people turn you off as president of the United States, ask George Bush, it's very hard to get them to click back in on you.
Agree?
Yeah, look, I think people like us can sit here and analyze the politics of this. I do think one thing about presidents is true. They make national security decisions with other things in mind other than tracking polls or, the media or a political push and pull. They make national security decisions based on information that only they have and based on the threats that they see that are imminent to the American people. That was his argument, that Iran was an imminent threat, that we didn't have time to wait, that this was the correct time to do it. Now, history will judge whether he was right or wrong about that, and history will judge how this ends, and history will judge whether he met his objectives. But in the moment, that's essentially what you hire a president to do, exercise their judgment to make national security decisions based on information that only they have, and that's what he's done here.
But history is really important. I'm glad you brought it up, because I hope that he's looking at history too, because history is there for all of us.
The speaker makes it clear that Adam Mockler understands this point, but argues that Donald Trump is not considering historical context in his decisions, suggesting that he lacks awareness or understanding of history and its lessons.
To look at. And if you look at, say, 1980 and the war between Iran and Iraq, Iraq offered a ceasefire 8 days in. 8 days in, they offered a ceasefire. Iran said no. Iran would say no to ceasefire 6 more times, and that war would drag on for 8 years. Iran doesn't want to move quickly. This is good for Iran. Iran is loving this. And they've been preparing for a war of attrition with us for 20 years. So the president walking in and saying, it's terminated, we're done, we've won, they get a say. The enemy gets a say.
I don't think the Ayatollah would agree that this has been good for him. I mean,
I didn't say for the Ayatollah.
I mean, but the top layer of the regime would not agree that it's been.
We've
good
opened
for them.
up sanctions.
We've
If the
destroyed
point is
their
to
economy.
drive the economy to their
currency.
knees, we're opening up sanctions.
We've destroyed their economy, and their currency is now basically worthless. I think it's, in my opinion, it's a stretch to say it's good for them.
And yet we can't get.
They're not running to get a deal.
Open.
We have it.
They're not
closed.
running to get a
We're
deal.
blocking it. I mean, it's our strategy to keep it closed in order to bring them to the table. That is the current strategy. Now, you may disagree with that or think we should be having a different strategy, but the current strategy is no bombs, but a blockade to bring them to their knees to the point where they have to come to the table.
Look, I don't reflexively root for the president to lose on this because the president of the United States is the symbol of the American democracy. And so if the president fails, it means that we as a country have failed. The problem is here, the president's not doing what it takes to bring us together in order to accomplish the goal. He's not getting the American people around this goal. He's got some questions about the military strategy. Iran now controls, or is at least a partner in controlling a very strategic asset in the Middle East that they didn't have any say in before. So I think what we need is the president to try to bring Americans together, whether it's Democrats in Congress, it's people in the American public, to try to accomplish this goal. And right now, he's not doing any of those things. Instead, he looks like he's sort of moving all over the place. Iran is holding steady, and the president keeps changing his mind every couple of days.
All right, well, we're going to continue to talk about this coming up.
Cupp's point in that discussion was essentially about how the situation could be playing into Iran's hands, and the wider debate on that CNN panel reflected a bigger divide over how the conflict is being viewed, with critics arguing that expectations of a quick or easy outcome were unrealistic, especially given how past wars like Iraq and Afghanistan played out, while supporters of the strategy framed it as necessary for long-term security. But the reality shown in that viral exchange is that even basic questions about results and outcomes sparked tension, with Adam Mockler repeatedly pressing Scott Jennings to name clear gains from the war, something he struggled to answer directly, which contributed to the heated moment on air. And that moment went viral not just because of the argument itself, but because it highlighted growing public frustration, with polls showing a majority of Americans viewing the war as a mistake. So the bigger takeaway here is less about one side winning the argument and more about how divided and uncertain the overall narrative around the conflict has become.